Predictably, the Iowa-LSU game broke the ratings record for women's basketball, which had stood for 41 years. So, Keyshawn, biggest reason you see for this?
Well, first of all, I'll start with the build-up to the rematch. It was a build-up, right? Mm-hmm. There was a build-up. You start off with the LSU situation out here with UCLA, and then you talk about, then you move to Iowa, and you talk about Caitlin Clark and her phenomenal career and who she is as a basketball player. And if you didn't want to watch her, I mean, if you hadn't watched her, you want to watch her. And then there's Angel Reese there, and there's the ring finger and the whole deal. So all that is part of the package in the build-up.
It was huge.
Right? And then there's Kim Mulkey, obviously. Mm-hmm. Now, all of a sudden, there's this rivalry because of last year that we made it seem like it was a rivalry that would carry on forever. Like it's Louisville, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina. That's the way we built it up.
Yep.
And then let's not forget about the fact that you are talking about a certain section and a region of individuals, whether we like to have, these conversations are uncomfortable to people, but
They shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be. No. But you got a section of America that's pulling for one side, and you got another section of America pulling for another, and it all comes together, and they look at it and they go, well, here's the numbers at 12 million people. Where in 1983, when USC played Kim Mulkey's Louisiana Tech team, that was at 11.4, I think it was, 11.4 million people. At that time, that was the highest rating for women basketball championship. Mm-hmm. And so you look at that was, Louisiana Tech, nice, quiet, down there in the South, versus the bright lights of Southern California, Cheryl Miller,
yep.
The number one player to ever play. Will she ever be the first to play in the NBA?
Yep. That was all going.
I remember that as a kid.
Yep.
I just remember it as a kid growing up as a USC fan. They talk about Cheryl Miller playing in the NBA. I'm like, huh? But this is why I believe that. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, you were going to get good, if not great, basketball from one or the other or both. And we got it from both. We got it from both. We got to see Caitlin Clark in the third quarter just turn into something else in the machine. Unfortunately for LSU, in that with Angel Reese getting hurt, her ankle, it didn't work out so well in the second half of them. Mm-hmm. But Caitlin just was, I don't know, she was like just on another mission. And so that's why everybody, look, as I said to you yesterday, I ain't never in my life watched 8 quarters of no damn women's basketball.
Nope.
I've watched 4, but 8 meaning the 4 there and then plus the USC game, I've never done that before. But I enjoyed it. And if women's basketball in college could stay this way, I don't know that it will. I know as long as there's a creation of good players and star players and stuff like that, I think it can. But you had 2 of the best to ever do it in college basketball, playing against each other. So you wanted to dial it in.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to start with this. In 1979, I was there in Salt Lake City in press row, on the front row, courtside, for Larry Bird versus Magic Johnson, Indiana State versus Michigan State in the national final on a Monday night. And it shattered all the ratings records. It did an estimated 35 million viewers. That's 3 times what Caitlin versus Angel just did.
What you would probably expect from a men's standpoint back then, right?
Yep.
I mean, you would expect that.
Okay, but why did it work? Because you had this kid out of nowhere, this quote-unquote kick from the sticks.
Right,
yep.
French
Lick, Indiana. He had tried to play for Bobby Knight and said, no, thank you, and left to go home to Indiana State. And look at him now. He brought his team with a bunch of nobodies all the way up to play Magic Johnson and Gregory Kelser, who was going to be an NBA player, in the national final. And it was spectacular. And again, you say it's uncomfortable to bring up race. Well, it's just life.
No, I ain't uncomfortable for me. I'm good.
Okay. People yell, well, you can't talk about race. You're racist if you talk about race. No, it's just real
it's the
talk
reality
in
of
real
how
life.
People think, man.
And this is what was happening.
Yeah.
Much of white America was rooting for Larry Bird, and I'm sure much of black America was rooting for Magic and Gregory Kelser, but especially Magic Johnson, who had the greatest smile in the history of sports. And as great a charisma.
John came along, got it. Go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. But the point was, it was spectacular theater. the white guy against the black guy. And it took them a while, but in pro basketball, obviously, they became friends, friendly rivals. And yet, those two were about to reignite the NBA, which was struggling on hard times at that point.
They saved the NBA.
They saved it. They just did. And they also put this thing called Final Four on the national map because it really wasn't on the map at that point. It wasn't an event. It wasn't a mega, gotta watch it annual event until those two put it on the map in of all places, Salt Lake.
People, I'm still dumbfounded about 35 million people. I just didn't even think y'all had TVs like that back then.
You think TV was invented in like 1975?
No, we had a boob TV, but it was only like 8 channels or something like that. 35 million people just sounds like a lot back then.
It does?
It just sounds like a lot back then.
It was
70,
big
what did you say, 78, 79?
It was in 1979. Yep.
It just sounds like a lot. 35 million people to watch.
Would you believe
in college basketball
that there was this thing, color television, back then? They actually had color TV.
You had the money to buy a color TV. I had a black and white TV.
I did not have the money.
Antennas.
I did not have the money.
You did. You was working. You were in press row. You were making money.
By in 1979 I was. I thought you meant when I was
not 1969. No, 79.
By the way, color TV got invented in the 1950s, so it wasn't like it was black and white.
I didn't have a color TV until Lord knows when, the 80s.
So then in 1983, a game I must admit I did not watch, but it was the women's final. And guess what it was? You just alluded. You had Cheryl Miller, who was the greatest college player up to that point. Obviously the sister of the great Reggie Miller out here in La La Land, up against little Kim Mulkey, the pint-sized spark plug.
We had Cheryl, Paula and Pam McGee. We had Cynthia Cooper. We were
loaded.
We had a squad.
Louisiana Tech was loaded with good basketball players. But again, Kim was a junior that year, pint-sized spark plug point guard. Go watch. I started watching the video of it. You can just call it up on YouTube. And look how small she was, but she was fiery and quick and...
She's fiery now.
Well, she still is. She's the same. She just the same.
I like her,
She's the same as a coach. And by the way, it's intriguing to me that she has now participated as a player and a coach in the 2 biggest ratings ever, and that's no coincidence because she ignites a lot of controversy.
I mean, she has her own way about going and doing things. But there's one thing in all of this. We talk about the component of white versus black. It's not just that. It's also the region, the school versus this particular school.
Although the irony, it was flipped in 1983 because Ruston, Louisiana is in the South, right? So Louisiana Tech with Kim Mulkey, the little white point guard, was from the South.
Yeah, but Louisiana at that point in time, in that part of the country, was a different world than it is today in Louisiana. So it basically gives you the same sort of context. But what I was going to say is you got a team in Iowa who's trying to get to the national title, who's trying to, that whole region of the Nebraska, Iowa, Colorado, Kansas, whatever else is around up into that, Dakotas, all of that, they're trying to get to where LSU has already been, where Kim Mulkey's been 4 times. And they got Caitlin Clark to try to finish the deal, because when you start talking about the GOATs and things of that nature, you can't be considered a GOAT if you ain't cashed in on a chip. You just can't. You can't.
I'll buy that.
You can't fill up the statistical side of things, but yet and still don't get a ring. And that's another component in all of this. Will she be able to finish the deal and get the ring before she goes and...
Okay, that's looking ahead now.
No, but even though we're looking ahead, you still viewed in to see if she had the capabilities to get there to finish the deal.
And by the way, she and her squad lost to that squad a year ago by 17 in the national championship game. So it was a wipeout. It was 102-85. And I told you on game day, I said, wait a second, I was a 1.5 favorite. I couldn't see it. It just looked to me like LSU's team was better than Iowa's team.
I think once Angela Reese got hurt, it flipped completely in Iowa's favor.
And by the way, back to you call it stereotyping, but it's just a fact. You had Iowa, a majority white team with what, 4 white starters against the LSU team that had only 1 white starter, right? The majority black team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
no,
that's
you did.
okay. There you go. Well, it's unusual. So it worked for ratings.
It reminds me. I didn't obviously watch the Kentucky UTEP, or was it UTEP at the time?
Yeah, is Texas El Paso.
Yeah, Texas El Paso when they beat Kentucky back way when with Pat Riley. I obviously didn't watch the game. I wasn't around then, but I know about it. I've read about it.
With an all-black starting 5.
Yeah, all-black starting 5 versus a Kentucky team that had an all-black, all-white starting 5.
That is true. Adolph Rupp. Ugh. And
I didn't play for him, so.
Yeah, but they broke through and won it all.
Yeah.
And they were something.
I'm surprised. I wonder what those ratings were.
I don't know.
I wonder what those ratings were.
I'm
sure they was high. I'm sure they was high.
Yeah, I was a big fan of my hometown team at that point. You won't even know it, but it was called Oklahoma City University, and they were a national power that year. So there were only 8 teams in the March Madness.
Does Oklahoma City still exist?
Yeah, they still have a school there, NAIA, I believe. But they had a legendary coach named Abe Lemons. And they ran into, in the first round of it was only 8 teams in the playoffs, but they ran into Texas El Paso, and we had it on Oklahoma City TV, regional, and I'm sitting watching it because my team had won, like, I don't know, they were like 30-2 or something that year. They were spectacular, scoring 120 a game, and they ran into that team, and it's David Latin and
they ran into a bunch of brothers. Huh?
Hey, and they had the reason they were good is they had a bunch of brothers that they recruited from Kentucky. So they were also that way, but they ran into those brothers, and those brothers were way better than our brothers, and that was the end of that. But that team went on to make history.
Yeah.
And it changed college basketball forever.
I mean, obviously, like I said, I just know about it because I've read about it and I've followed it. You know.
Pat Riley was on that.
Yeah, Pat Riley was
Kentucky
on the team.
Then drafted my Dallas Cowboys to play football, but he chose wisely to play basketball.
Who drafted? What?
The Cowboys drafted Pat Riley.
To do what?
To play tight end.
Really?
Yep. Well,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's
good
a
high
fact
school
that
football.
I didn't know.
Yeah, there you go. But in those days, they drafted everybody.
They should try to get him to come back and play and help him out.
Okay. Thanks for watching, Undisputed fans. Do you want more highlights from the show? Make sure to click that subscribe button for all the exclusive content from Undisputed.